Hi guys, Howard Croston. You join me today on the banks of a rather cold River Itchen, and I'm going to tie a few of my favourite patterns that are available from Fulham Mill. So, the next fly I'm going to tie is a fly called the Dark Knight. Now basically it's a variation on a black pheasant tail effectively. It's a fly that I use a lot when the fish have been picked on a little bit. So when they're a little bit more pressured, I'll often reach out for this fly. It's also quite a good fly in coloured water. With it being black and having some volume from the CDC hackle, it's also got a very, very good profile that stands out in slightly murky water. But because of that CDC hackle, it makes noise in the water. So it moves quite a lot when you're fishing it, and if you actively jig it, it can help attract fish to it. So it's a really, really good fly, both in pressured clear water and in coloured water when you're trying to get fish to actually see or feel the fly with the lateral line. So what I've got in the hook is a size 16 Jig Force hook. You can tie it in multiple sizes obviously. Coloured water you might want it a little bit bigger. Clear water for pressured fish, a little bit smaller. Onto the hook I've got mounted a black nickel tungsten bead. This particular one's a 3mm one. Again, tie it in a range of sizes and weights. I'm going to drop on behind the bead just with my fly tying thread. I'm just using a white GSP type thread. You're not going to see it, so it doesn't really matter what the colour is. I'll just set the bead in like that. Now, I'll cut the tag end off. I'll be honest, with a lot of my fly tying, it isn't done to look pretty or, you know, overly neat, to be honest. It's really done to be quick. So often what I'll do is I will tie my ribbon material in right up behind the bead. In this case it's fine red wire, and I'll run down to the end of the hook shank. So that's the ribbon set in place. At this point I'll put the tail in. The tail's just going to be some black cock hackle fibres, so I'll strip a little bunch of those off. Make sure they're nice and level, and then I will nip them in on top of the hook shank. There we go, tail tied in. I'll run forward, catch those in, then run back down. One trick to getting a nice neat flat body, if you're worried about things like that, is to, when you tie your materials in, is not to tie them all in at the back end and create a hump. Make sure that the materials are tied in the length of the body. So there we go. Now the body is going to be some black pheasant tail. Take a few fibres of that, snip the tips off so they're nice and level, tie them in top of the shank, and then run down again to behind the bead. So now I've got a nice flat level base in which to tie all the materials. So now what I'll do is wind that black pheasant tail down the body and stop probably a couple of mil, 2 to 3 mil shy of the bead, just leaving me a little bit of space for my thorax and the hackle. Tie that in, trim off all the tag ends, and then I'll take the red wire rib and I'll counter rib it over the pheasant tail. Now that counter ribbing obviously helps in terms of making a tighter body to the fly. It tightens everything in. If you rib in the same direction, the rib sinks into the body material, and overall the fly is not as secure. So again, I'm using GSP thread so I can put a lot of turns in without the bulk. Snip the wire off. At that point I'm going to take a little bit of holographic tinsel This is a chartreuse green colour. Doesn't have to be holographic actually, you can use any kind of green tinsel, but I quite like a bright green hotspot in this particular fly. And the main reason being, it's not a hotspot colour that loads and loads of people use. Most hotspots tend to be red or orange or that kind of colour. So I often like using a hotspot colour that's a little bit different. Again, just a personal thing. Maybe in my head it gives me a little bit more confidence when I'm fishing for pressured fish. So I'll put a couple of turns, 2 or 3 turns on top of each other of that right in behind the bead. Catch that in. Take the tag end off. Next thing I'm going to use, a little bit of fully milled CDC. This is the natural grey colour. I've already picked out a slightly smaller feather here for this. So take the feather, separate out a few fibres away from the tip where I'm going to tie it in, and stroke them back like that. I'm going to catch that in behind the bead. Then I'm going to make a couple of turns just like you would with a normal hackle, right in behind the bead. 1, 2, catch that in, tighten that down. There's lots of ways you can put the CDC in. You can wind it like a hackle like I've done. You can split the thread and just put the fibres in. You can use a CDC clamp. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing it. That's about the quickest, and for me, where I like to tie fast functional flies, that's the way I prefer to do it for this particular type of pattern. Cut the tag end off, sweep everything back, and then knock in a whip finish. Snug it all down nice and tight. That little bit of thread behind the bead vanishes into the recess. Got the tag end off. And obviously because we're on film I'll have to neaten it up. There we go, although I wouldn't normally bother. And there we go. That is a size 16 3mm beaded Dark Night. Absolutely killer pattern. Pressured fish in low clear water, and also very good in coloured water when you're trying to get the fish to see a nice outline profile of a fly with the added advantage of some movement from the CDC. Give it a go, it is an absolute killer.